Duty of Society, Part 3, Session 3. Tariffs, they say, are also for raising revenue. We will in this session consider whether tariffs as a means of raising revenue is a viable one. Even opponents of protectionism are concerned that tariffs should be kept for the purpose of raising revenue. They object not to the tariff, but only to its protective features and are agreeable to not abolishing it directly, but only restricting its purpose for revenue purposes only. They say that the only justification for a tariff is a good means to raise revenue. Let us inquire into this. Duties on imports are indirect taxes. We must therefore examine whether indirect taxation is a good means of raising revenue. Indirect taxes usually require large and expensive custom officers and enforcement of vexatious and injurious regulations. Anyone who has personally ever tried to import anything into the country can attest to this. Collection of these taxes, land frontiers and seacoast, must be guarded and watched. Imports will only be allowed in certain places and under regulations which are vexatious and involve wasteful delays and expenses. Just look at the port of any of your port cities to have this borne out. Consuls must be opened and maintained all over the world. Vessels are watched from the time they enter a port until they leave. Everything must be conspicuously examined. Although there are all these prohibitions, restrictions such as surveillance and oaths taken, indirect taxes are, by and large, evaded. Bribery of custom officials, the use of methods for eluding vigilance, although an expense to the imported goods, are much less than the taxes imposed. These charges, whether through taxes or through bribes or others, ultimately fall on the consumer, and as such, this method of taxation is very wasteful, taking much more from the consumer than what the government obtains. Still more important objection to indirect taxation is that when imposed on articles of general use, it is in here that substantial revenues could be gained. It bears with greater impact on the poor than on the rich. Indirect taxes fall on those in relation to consumption and not in relation to possession. They are heaviest on those whose consumption is largest. So, in relation to a large family, this indirect tax will be larger than on a small family, regardless of each family's ability to pay. Even if cheaper goods were taxed at a higher rate than the more expensive, such taxation would still be unjust. But we know that with cheaper goods, there is the tendency to impose heavier taxes on these goods because of more use than the costlier goods used by the rich. This is because of necessity. Larger amounts of articles of common consumption afford a wider basis for larger revenues than the smaller amounts of the costlier goods. Also, taxes on the cheaper goods cannot be so easily evaded. The more costly the goods, it is found that it is easier to undervalue and to even evade taxation. Indirect taxes bear more heavily on the poor than on the rich, and this is the reason why it is so readily adopted. The rich are more powerful and have much more influence on government and public opinion. The poor have no influence, while indirect taxes cause no loss to those who initially pay, collected in such pernicious ways from those who finally pay that it is not even realized. The best means of getting the largest revenue from the body of citizens with the least influence over the amount collected and the uses to which it will be put. This lack of influence by the poor is the main reason why governments have resorted to indirect taxation on imports. A direct tax whose necessity and justice are unclear can always be protested against. Indirect tax is not subject to such scrutiny and is usually extremely difficult for persons to refuse to pay. Indirect taxes become indistinguishably blended in with the cost of the goods. When the goods reach those who finally pay, together with all costs and profits of collection, it is not a tax still to be paid, but one which has already been paid a while ago, and one which cannot be separated from the other elements which go to make up the cost of the goods. There is no choice but to pay the tax or go without the goods. Stood at the entrance of every store and demanded a tax on every article bought, there would be an outcry. But the very people who would make this outcry would gladly pay increased prices as a result of indirect taxes from tariffs. Government always prefer a way to collect taxes that are pernicious, not obvious, but citizens always demand that taxes be direct so that the regime could be thoroughly tendency of the restrictions and regulations necessary for the collection of indirect taxes is to concentrate business and give large capital an advantage. But even in the absence of these, indirect taxation tends to concentration. These taxes add to the price of goods, not only the tax itself, but also the profit upon the tax. Capital is concentrated for the following reasons. One, the need of larger capital for dealing in goods that have been enhanced in cost by taxation. Two, the restrictions imposed on trade to secure the collection of the tax. And three, better opportunities which those who do business on a large scale have of managing the payment or evading the tax. These three tend to concentrate business, check consumption, permit large profits, which are ultimately paid by the consumers. Importers, therefore, are very much in favor of indirect taxes. This favor that importers have for paying indirect taxes is confirmed by the fact that reduction or repeal of these is never demanded. On the contrary, such propositions are opposed. Manufacturers and dealers have never striven to secure reduction of heavy taxation on imports. Importers who pay the immense sums collected by the customs have never protested at the duties, although they may complain about the manner of collection. Some indirect taxes may be commendable, such as taxes on alcohol and tobacco, which seek and tend to reduce consumption on these and so enhance morals and reduce vice. Some say that all these taxes merely do is force persons so inclined to consume cheaper liquor and tobacco. To summarize, we go to what Henry George said, but merely as a means of raising revenue, it is clear that indirect taxes are to be condemned, since they cost far more than they yield, bear with the greatest weight upon the least able to pay, add to corruptive influence, and lessen the control of the people over their government. If we do not need a tariff protection, we need no tariffs at all, and for the purpose of raising revenue, should resort to some system which will not tax the mechanic as heavily as the millionaire, and will not call on a man who rears a family to pay on that account more than the man who shirks his natural obligation and leaves some woman whom in the scheme of nature it was intended for to take care of herself. We take a short break now. second half, we will look at tariffs used solely for protection. Protective tariffs differ from revenue tariffs in their object. They protect the home products from the competition of imported commodities. Revenue and protection are distinct and antagonistic. A tariff can raise revenue and give some protection, but as one object is secured, the other is sacrificed. Revenue depends on goods actually coming in. Protection, to be successful, must keep goods out. Protection is a national policy which levies duties on the importation of commodities in order to encourage domestic industry. It is sometimes said that this does not increase prices. But how does it encourage domestic industry? To say that this encourages the home producer is to say that it encourages him without doing anything for him. It is also said that protection increases competition in the home market by attracting more customers into the market when the profit potential is seen. This competition, when free to operate, ultimately brings profit to a uniform level, but prices are not so commensurately reduced as they would without the indirect tax. Prices are usually higher than if the goods were imported. If foreign goods are, however, allowed in with duties imposed, this compels the price of the local goods to increase. If there is a total shutout of foreign goods, the price of local goods is sure to go up. The system of protectionism, therefore, is simply a system to encourage certain industries to obtain higher prices for the goods that they produce. It is a clumsy way of giving encouragement which extracts an unfair burden on the common man in paying indirect taxes and enhanced prices for goods. When we encourage any industry, we raise the price of its products. We at the same time produce an adverse effect upon other industries that use these products, and so it have an increasing effect on prices in these industries. There is usually a ripple of price increases throughout the economy. There is the view that free trade is right in theory, but wrong in practice. The theory of free trade may be carved into practice to the point of ideal perfection. To serve free trade, we need only to abolish transactions. Protection in practice means that some goods are taxed and others not taxed. Next week, we'll continue our discussion on trade. Before we end, I would like again to let you attendees know that Unsustainable Development is an educational offering devoted to the dissemination of its course to all of mankind and to those who have the English language as their official language in the first instance, and to all of mankind eventually all over the world. To make this possible, and because we do not charge a fee for this dissemination, we rely wholeheartedly on monetary donations to meet the cost of achieving these goals. If you have found these sessions useful thus far and would like others to have access to them, we would gratefully accept your donations should you be inclined to offer them. You can send donations to our PayPal account at the email address notebroker2001@yahoo.com. Thank you for your kind gesture. You can communicate with us by going to our Facebook page on Sustainable Development or to our YouTube channel, Balancing the Economy. We will respond to all your comments or questions. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the alert button to get notices that our latest session has been posted. All sessions are archived at our Facebook page. Please share with your family, friends, and acquaintances.